what I want to do today is, this evening, is to share maybe a couple of experiences that I had that I think really changed my career, but yet made my life more satisfying for me and one where I feel it was more successful. So one of the hardest things that is for you to trust your own intuition, particularly when it's different from conventional thinking. So first, what is the definition of intuition? I had to look it up because I wasn't really sure, because all I could think of is it's your gut. And essentially that's what it is. It's a natural ability or power that makes it possible to know something without any proof or evidence. A feeling that guides a person to act without fully understanding why. And so, in both of the instances that I want to talk to you tonight about, I will tell you, I really have no idea why I made the decisions I made. I simply knew something needed to be right for me, and I followed my gut. So, with that, I want to talk about two experiences. It's like really loud. It sounds like it's really loud. Is it okay? Okay. I want to talk about two experiences. One that came very early in my career, and one that came much later in my career. So let's go back to 1982. Yes, I am very, very old for you younger people here in the audience. I had personally just gotten married in April to a gentleman that I was deeply in love with. We're divorced now, by the way. Has nothing to do with this decision, though. We had just bought our first home. My husband worked for Pete Marwick at the time. That's where we met. I, in the meantime, had gone to work at the railroad, and the railroad was not Norfolk Southern at the time. This is how old I am. It was actually Norfolk and Western, which was later to become, in 1982, Norfolk Southern. So for most people that, again, a lot of young people here, 1982, the economy was not great in North America. It was a very difficult time. Job market was not really good. The rail industry had really struggled. 1970s, there was tons of bankruptcies. That's when Consolidated Rail was started. And so the industry was struggling. And so there was a round of consolidations. And so the company that I had gone to work for, Norfolk and Western, had chosen to consolidate with Southern Railway to become Norfolk Southern. And that happened in 1982. The merger was approved in 1982, and that's when I knew my life was probably going to change. The railroad had decided that the headquarters would be at a third place or a neutral place and was not going to be at either one of the headquarters of the two railroads that were merging. And at the time, I was working in the controller's office in financial reporting, and good chances that's not going to be anywhere but the head office. So I knew that I was probably going to be faced with a move. So I did know that a lot of functions were going to be remaining in my hometown, which was also in Virginia. I was hoping that I would be able to stay in my hometown, maybe change jobs and not have to move. So right before, it was Memorial Day in the U.S., which is the end of May, the controller came to me and spoke to me about a job. And he wanted me, of course, to move to Norfolk, which is about 400 kilometers away from where I lived. Not an awful distance, but 400 kilometers is still 400 kilometers. But to my surprise, it was a huge promotion. He was offering me a position as director. And that was, in the rail industry, a big move. It was the first level of senior management. At that time, it was the first level that even received bonuses, options, big-time money I was down here in little time money. This was big time money. I was going to be the first woman director for the company. I was going to be the youngest director for the company. And it was really a great opportunity for me. And I sat there and listened, and he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I don't know. I just got married. It's not just my decision, and I don't know. So he said, well, you have plenty of time to think about it. He says, I want you to think about it. He said, I know you love your hometown. You're very close to your family. But I need you in Norfolk. And that's the only job that's going to be made available to you. Well, I said, well, you know, there's other jobs going to be here. Couldn't I do something else? No, this is the only job that will be made available to you. And you have 3 months to decide. He says, take your time, go look for houses, talk to your husband, and you decide. But I know what's best for you. I remember he told me this. I know what's best for you, and this is what you need to do. So I went home and told my husband, and, well, he wasn't that excited, to be honest. But he said, well, you know, Pete Marwick or KPMG, they have an office in Norfolk. I'll talk with them about a transfer. And so we spent the summer, we looked at houses. He lined up that he could get a transfer. And we looked at various houses, and we went and wined and dined with people, and I continued to do my job, and I kept having this feeling in my stomach that it wasn't right for me. The job was not right for me. The move was not right for me. And while I had 3 months to decide, every time I pick up the telephone to call the controller, I'd say, I just can't do it, and I hang up the phone. And I did this off and on. Now you can imagine my friends and colleagues, they were like, what's wrong with you? Your husband can move. You're being offered a promotion, unbelievable. It was like taking me up 3 levels from where I was. You know, you won't be that far away from home. It's 400 kilometers. You can get home easily. What's wrong with you? And I could not answer it. I can still remember. I couldn't answer it. I just had this gnawing feeling in my stomach. It wasn't right. So the Friday before Labor Day, which was actually the first weekend in September, I can remember all this. I hated that whole summer. My God, it was awful. Oh, during the summer, as we looked for jobs and everything, I didn't really have that much work to do because I actually had helped move the department. The department actually moved without me. And so during that time, I was working on special projects because there was a lot that needed to be done with the merger and getting new departments in. And so one of the special projects that I was working on was a corporate tax project. And I knew, people in finance understand that just because you're a CA doesn't mean you know corporate tax. I mean, I always worked the audit side and the financial reporting side. I'd never done corporate tax before. But I went up and had this very special project, which was on the excess loss account for disposing of a subsidiary, which my rail friends would find funny. You guys, it was a subsidiary that was formed to hold the D&H. In the bankruptcy of the Penn Central, that Norfolk and Western was forced to operate in that bankruptcy. And so in addition to not knowing corporate tax, this was a very specific and very detailed project. But I threw myself into it, and I loved it. I actually worked hard on it and presented my findings to this AVP of taxation. and he seemed to like the work that I did. So the Friday before Labor Day, which was, again, that first weekend in September, I actually did not know what I was going to say to the controller when I called him. So when I did call him, it came out, no, I was not going to take the job. I literally did not know until I picked up the phone. And he said, well, I really hate to hear that. He says, I guess you can work till the end of the month, and that'll be your last day. And I said, you sure? There's plenty of jobs here, and I'd really like to have one of them. And he says, nope, I told you. You know, there was an unwritten rule at the railroad, if you didn't take a transfer, you really were toast. So I was toast. So I started looking for a job and ended up having a staff job opening at a CA firm. And I said, well, at least I'll be able to make some money. And so I had till the end of the month to leave the company. And so I started to doubt myself, and I thought, well, was this really the right thing? You know, here I don't have another job. I don't really want to be a staff accountant at a CA firm. But I knew I still didn't want to move, and I didn't want to take that job. Still don't know why to this day I didn't, except the day before was my last day. I came in and I was told to report up to the tax department. So I went up to the tax department thinking I had another special project to do, and they didn't know that I only had one more day left. And I met with this AVP, and he offered me a job in the tax department. He said, it took me 3 weeks to convince him that I should be able to hire you, but he says, I really want you to come work for me. And I said, sure, done. Didn't even think about it, because I really liked this guy. Little did I know that in 8 years, this AVP of taxation was going to become the CEO of Norfolk Southern. And he was instrumental as a mentor for guiding me for the rest of my career at Norfolk Southern. And I am eternally grateful that I had that opportunity to work with him and to be given the opportunities, because from there I worked in various functions in finance, transportation planning, strategic planning, technology, I mean, it just, everything. I did every different type of job, and that was because of him. And I also was fortunate enough to be the youngest, not only the youngest director, still the youngest director at the company, but also the youngest vice president, senior vice president, and executive vice president, and also the first woman in all those. So you never know. And I still don't know why I didn't go, but I know that my career would have been eternally different had I been in the financial reporting side of that. And I will tell you, more people at the time told me I was crazy and that I did not know I was making the biggest mistake. And literally, in my view, it was the right thing for me. So now I'll come to the second decision tree that I had. This was 2005. So I did all those things that you said, and enjoying and loving my career at Norfolk Southern. And in 2005, David was planning to retire, and they were going to announce the successor CEO. So I was fortunate enough, me and 2 others, to be in running for the CEO job. Not really a fun competition, let me tell you. And so it went on for about 6 months in 2005. As you can imagine, I didn't get the job, which was fine. And so when David called me into his office to tell me who was being named as the next CEO and why I didn't become the CEO, it was very interesting. He told me, he said, Kathryn, He said, you didn't want it. And I looked at him and I said, after I put up with all this stuff for 6 months, you didn't think I wanted it? And he says, no. He says, we had to talk to psychiatrists and psychologists and consultants and everything. And he says, every one of them concluded that from your interviews. And, it kind of made me mad when I first thought about it. And then I looked at him and I said, yeah, you're probably right. I don't know that I really did want it. He said, what I've always wanted to be is the CFO, and that's what we've talked about for years, which is what I would be doing. And then he looked at me and he said, Kathryn, I'm not going to name the next CFO. The new CEO is going to be the one that names the next CFO. And I said, yeah, sounds fair enough, but I knew because of my experience that I felt like I was going to be the logical choice. However, I did know there was one little problem. And that problem was that I currently did not really get along with the CFO that was there. And I knew that politics were probably going to be at play. And the CFO and I had worked together for 27 years. Janet, you said 25, but it was 27 years. You rounded down, that's good. And so I said, and so the CFO, the existing CFO, announced he was going to stay on for another year and help make the decision of who was going to be the next CFO. Well, I said, oops, that's not good for me, because I knew that he and I, again, did not get along. So it became January of 2006. The new CEO was announced. And so Wick and I, who were very good friends, he calls me into his office and he says, Kathryn, I've decided what role I want you to play in the organization. I want you to be the Executive Vice President of Strategy and CIO. And I looked at him and I said, really? I don't want to do that. And he said, that's where I need you. And I said, yeah, we both know that's not the way this is playing out. We had that kind of relationship because we were very good friends. And he says, no. He says, this is where I need you. And in fact, Kathryn, I'm going to tell you, the CFO will never be paid a penny more than you are. This is an important job, and this is the job I want for you. This is where I need you. He says, it'll be fun, it'll be exciting. And so I looked at him, I said, it's not the role I want. But, I'll give it a try. So I went along and worked on the job, but I was very, very unhappy. And I had so many friends tell me, what are you unhappy about? Well, my God, you're the luckiest unhappy person I've ever seen in my life. You've got an executive vice president job, you're being paid bukus of money, and I was. I had really interesting relationships, interline relationships with all the other railroads. I was traveling all over the country. Everybody said, you've got the dream job. And I said, well, I'm not happy. Just not happy. And so I started thinking, well, what if I decided to leave? I have 27 years with a company. I had deferred compensation plans that I'd been participating in years that would all trigger and become immediately taxable. I had options because I wasn't old enough to retire that I was not vested in and I would lose. I had options that had vested that I would have to immediately exercise because, again, I wasn't retiring. And I had a pension plan, deferred benefit pension plan, that my high five, I was just starting my high five, so, difference between a senior vice president and executive vice president's pretty good when it comes to that high five. And so again, when you look at logic, you would say to yourself, why in the world would somebody who's vested 27 years of their life have all this vested interest think about leaving the company? But I was unhappy. I didn't like the role I had. And again, my gut kept saying, this isn't what you want to do for the next 5, at a minimum 5, because that's what I have to stay for my high 5 and before I could retire, and even on an early retirement, and 10, if you were to stay for full retirement. And I started thinking, 5 to 10 years. Well, 27 went pretty fast, but can I do 5 to 10 doing something I don't feel passionate about? So I started talking to some headhunters. Again, just sticking my toe in. And of course, all the headhunters said, well, you've got to go when you're 50 or you're going to be over the hill and ancient. And so, if you're going to do it, you got to do it now. So I remember being in a dry run for those that have to ever do board meetings. The company I was at, you always had to do dry runs and practice your speeches and everything. And so I was in the dry run for one of our board meetings, and the guy that was going to be the CFO was giving the presentations that I had given for the previous 8 years. And he didn't know crap, which really pissed me off. And I sat there in that meeting, and that stupid gut of mine was just churning. And I said, I can't do it. I cannot do this for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this. And yes, I'm walking away from a lot of things, but I can't do it. At least I'm fortunate enough to have those options, So I walked out of that meeting, and I said, I had an email from a headhunter. I said, I'm going to call this headhunter and tell him I'm going to put a resume together and put myself on the market. Strangely enough, and this is coincidence, I still think, when I opened my emails up, this was back before telephones, right? Back before, so you had to actually go back to your desk and open your emails up. And there was a email from Fred Green, for those people at CP, who I had only met twice at some industry events, that very day that I had made this decision. And he had an email and said, would I call him? He had something he wanted to talk to me about, which I thought was kind of strange. And I thought, well, we were doing some negotiations with CP, so maybe it had something to do with that. So I get on the phone, and I call him, and he asked me, he says, would you consider coming to work at CP? And I said, yeah, I'd consider it. This was literally the same day as that meeting, that I had hit the wall in that meeting. And he says, well, I'll fly and meet you, and we'll talk about it. So from there, we negotiated and talked, and I made the decision to come to work at CP. Now, I will tell you, most conventional wisdom would have never said that made a lot of sense for me. And yet, I knew it was the right thing for me. At that time, I'm not married, but I'm living with somebody in sin. He was very kind. He said, if that's what you want to do, you need to do what's right for you. I'm not going up there, which he didn't. But I, again, had many friends, colleagues, to ask me to reconsider. Andrew Shields, who was the HR guy at CP, said, are you crazy? Look at what you're walking away from. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I looked at him and I said, no, I'm not sure it's what I want to do. I know it's what I need to do. Because also, at this time, I was going through some very big personal changes. For the previous 3 years, and even during the time I was going through the CEO selection process, my father was extremely ill, and I had been spending every weekend for 2 years going back and forth that 400 kilometers to help my mom take care of my dad during his illness. And he had just passed away 2 weeks before that meeting that I was in. And I think that personally, I was going through a lot of life changes. I was also 50 years old. That's not a good age for a woman, or a man, I guess. And I knew it was something, as I told Andrew, I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but it's something I know I needed to do. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world. I made great friends. I got to know Calgary as a home for 6 years. And I was fortunate enough to have new experiences and new life events that I would not have experienced otherwise. So I guess the moral of all this is, don't overthink things. Trust yourself. And when you think about all the books and articles and everything that you read, it always tells you, what are the pros? What are the cons? What is this? Logic, logic, logic. And sometimes logic isn't what's right for you. Doesn't mean you ignore it completely. But when logic doesn't feel like it fits you, or doesn't give you that right spot in your inner being, then I think you have to stop and realize that intuition, which is what is an accumulation of everything that you've learned through your whole life, everything that you've learned about yourself, everything that is you is that intuition. Sometimes logic doesn't make sense in it. And it's that intuition that can lead you to what makes you happy and what makes you feel fulfilled. And I think when I think about all the times people would say, "Are you crazy? What are you thinking? Why would you do this?" They're speaking from their life's experience. They're not speaking from your life experience. So while it's always very helpful to bounce ideas off of other people, don't ignore what's bouncing from inside you. Because you actually know you better than anybody else. And that's something that most people lose track of. So, you haven't given me the 5 minutes yet. Okay. So I just want to, I'm going to end with 2 quotes from people. One is Oprah, who I find interesting, successful woman. She says, check your ego at the door and check your gut instead. Every right decision I've made came from my gut. Every wrong decision I've made was the result of not listening to that greater voice inside myself. And here's a woman that is always confident, right? Everybody does that. And finally, Steve Jobs, who says, you have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down and has made all the difference in my life. So, good luck to all of you, and always think when you have a career decision, you're fortunate to be making a decision.
We have some questions.
You didn't get that role, so now you're meeting up with it again. You're seeing someone in it. How did you look at that role, realizing I could have been there, I'm not there? How did you feel about it?
Oh, well, I think the way I felt was why I had to leave. I mean, that was probably the main reason. I knew I couldn't look at that day in and day out knowing that I should be in that job and not have it. And I was not going to allow that to eat my gut out. I said, that life is way too short, because no matter how I tried to control it, it still ate at me. And so I knew I had to get away from that. I knew that. And that's why I made the decision to leave.
Anyone else? Question? Lisa.
So, coming from someone who's a number cruncher for most of their life, have you ever tried to use your gut or your instinct to sell a deal or to make a decision, and how did you go about doing that? Because we're usually told that's not what you do in a business setting.
Oh, absolutely. I would say the biggest thing that I did, that I used my gut on, that I actually closed a very innovative deal in the rail industry with another railroad that was quite hard to deal with. I don't know how to put that. And everyone said it couldn't be done. And there was empirical data on numbers that was moving one way or the other. And I knew in my gut some things were wrong. And we ended up closing the deal, getting the numbers to where they needed to, and and I will say I had a lot of uphill battle, because everybody kept going, you got to prove it, you got to prove it. And I said, I will, just trust me. And at that time, they did trust me. I closed the deal, and the numbers came through. So, but I'd have been toast if it hadn't.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, Kathryn. So after you made your gut decisions and you were looking forward, in moments of doubt, if you had them, what mechanisms did you use to, make your mind straight that, yep, I'm still going in the right direction?
That's an excellent question, because I will tell you, there were times. But you know what I always, I said was, the decision was mine. No one made that decision for me, good or bad. And so I'm going to live with what I felt was right for me at the time. And so there was times, I will tell you, when you sit and you question. But isn't it better to question yourself than it is to question or blame someone else for a decision you made? You can at least say, nobody told me to do this, nobody forced me to do this, this was my decision, and I did this on my terms. And when you can do that, doubt will always come, but it fades fast, at least for me. I just so adored my father, and my father was just one who, he was from an Italian family, and girls weren't given education and all this stuff, and he was emphatic about his girls always having a college education and having a profession that gave them choices. But he would always look at me and say, make sure whatever choice is your choice. And so I always live by that.
Anyone else? Okay, well, Kathryn, I just want on behalf of, let me just
Yeah,
grab
sure.
the mic here, but don't run away. I just want to thank Kathryn on behalf of everyone here for her very inspiring remarks. Go with your gut. Know yourself. And, you know, I'm sure Shakespeare probably had a phrase or two that put that in a different way. Exactly. But so, thank you so very, very much. And I'd just like to give you a small token of our appreciation for you being with us this evening. We very much appreciate it. Very inspiring. And fortunately, we have a record of this, and we'll be able to watch it again. Oh my gosh. Thank you so very much. Okay.